Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hi. Good, thanks, and you?
Good. Hi, Rosé. Great. Viv, I've just received a text from Jens that he's not able to find the link for today. Viv, can you do me a favor and just resend just to Jens Peterson? Do you have his email handy?
Maaza will check now and I'll send it to him.
Okay, it could be that he hasn't registered. I'll just send him a text and say he needs to register. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're just going to give people until 12:35 to join. So let's give people a few minutes to join. I'm just going to turn off my camera while we do that and just text the people who are asking for info. So just please be patient with us. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just giving people one more minute to join. We want to give people until 12:35 South African time, and then we'll start. So please be patient with us. We just have a few people who are still asking for the link, but welcome, welcome.
Hey guys, hey Maaza, sorry I'm late.
Hi, Jens. Welcome, welcome. I was just saying we're giving people just one more minute to join. There are some other people who also had issues with the link. How are you doing, Jens?
I'm fine, thanks. Just
good.
Yeah, busy.
Yeah.
Ethiopia is we should talk separate, you and I, on that, Maaza.
Okay.
But I'm doing a lot of stuff in Tigray.
Oh, are you really? Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would appreciate that. Okay, we're just giving people one more minute to join. We had actually over 40 registrants today, so maybe people are just slowly joining. You know what? I think we should go ahead and start. It's now 12:35. Welcome, everyone. We really appreciate you joining. As I said, we did have over 40 registrants today. Right now, we have 11 people in the group. So I would ask, just for those of you whose first time it is here, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself briefly. I know, Rosé, it's your first PVA Africa Network meeting, and I see Charles is here. So those of you for whom it's the first time, could I ask you to just introduce yourselves to the group?
Thank you, Maaza. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're situated today. I hope you're all well. My name is Rosé Echtesadi. You're welcome to call me Rosé, it's easier. I'm the executive director of SAFAIDS, which is a regional organization that advances SRHR and GESI in the SADC region, and we're delighted to be engaging today. And thank you to African Alliance for motivating us.
Great. And I'm so glad that you've also joined the People's Vaccine Alliance officially as SAFAIDS, which is fantastic. So welcome. Charles, could you introduce yourself? There's been so much excitement about your joining the People's Vaccine Alliance as an individual. So please introduce yourself.
I don't know why, but yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Charles Ebikemi. I'm a policy officer at the London School of Economics. I'm currently working on a project called the African Health Observatory Platform, and the goal is to sort of promote evidence-informed policymaking in the African region. But yeah, joining as on my individual capacity. So good to be here. Thanks.
Excellent. Welcome. Anybody else whose first time it is? Jens, I think it might be your first time joining this meeting, but I have a feeling that most people in the group know you, but please go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
I hope not. That would assume my reputation is advancing me, which is not a good thing. My name is Jens. I'm a senior advisor for Medicine Sans Frontières based in Johannesburg, and work as well with the as the MSF rep and interlocutor with Africa CDC and the African Union, in particular on the pandemic and vaccines, unsurprisingly. So thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have I forgotten? Vanessa, I think you've been here at least once before. Am I right? Vanessa, can you hear me? Vanessa is still on mute, so we'll let her unmute herself. Okay, so I have one request for today. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for making time for another Zoom call in an avalanche of Zoom calls. For those of you whom I haven't met, I'm Maaza Seyoum with the African Alliance, and the African Alliance, as you know, is trying very hard to coordinate the work of the People's Vaccine Alliance in Africa. There is a People's Vaccine Alliance global meeting today at 2 p.m. South African time. This is the first time that we've had that clash. So this meeting is held on the final Thursday of every month at usually at 2:30 p.m. South Africa. And we hadn't thought about the fact that the PVA global meeting is also on Thursdays, but bi-weekly. But this is our fourth meeting, and it's the first time that we've had the clash. So since that meeting is starting at 2 p.m. South Africa, I would ask if we can just finish 10 minutes earlier. This meeting is normally 90 minutes, but just to give those of us who will be transitioning to that other meeting time to get water and check emails and that kind of stuff. So I've asked Vivian to please just ping us all in the chat at 1:45 South Africa time, so we know that we have 5 minutes remaining. So thank you, Viv, for keeping us on track. I do have very, very, very short slides just for those of us whose first time it is in the meeting. But if you are joining the PVA Africa group, the PVA global group, you will have received all this information already. I just want to remind people, and we're actually a small group today, but just to remind those of you who are here that this is an informal monthly meeting for anybody who is interested and wants to join civil society people working on COVID-19 issues, COVID-19 vaccine equity around the continent. Anybody is welcome to join. For those of you who would like to join in a more formal capacity, the People's Vaccine Alliance, please contact me and we can make that happen. And if and when you do that, then you will be invited to the People's Vaccine Alliance bi-weekly calls, and also another set of working groups that the People's Vaccine Alliance has developed. So that's just something to keep in mind. And Rosé, I see your meeting. Don't worry. We'll make sure. I know that the People's Vaccine Alliance coordinator does send out notes from those global meetings, so you will get those. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can people see my screen? Yeah, okay, I see Jens
Yeah.
nodding, thank you. So just in terms of, and I'm just gonna turn off my camera because I will be, just so I can look at my notes and not distract you all. But of course, now this is not working for me. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of this today. Can everybody still see my screen? Yes. All right. I was hoping to turn off my camera, but my system is not cooperating, so you'll just have to bear with me. So I just wanted to run through these slides just as a reminder of what our hope is to cover today if we have enough time, just sort of an update from the People's Vaccine Alliance Global, the campaigns from the last month, and some basic data on vaccine rollout. But I know that a lot of you also have a lot of data that you're collecting, so please feel free to chime in. I wanted to update people on a strategy shift at the People's Vaccine Alliance and get your feedback. The People's Vaccine Alliance is quite keen to incorporate feedback from the Global South into their strategy shift. And for those of you who will, and I know Charles, I'm not sure if you'll be joining the global meeting, but there was some talk about this yesterday at that other meeting you and I were in. So I'm sure the strategy will be discussed there as well. But just to get your thoughts on the strategy shift. Then I wanted to give you all an opportunity to update the rest of us on the burning issues that you were working on across the continent on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccine equity, recent activities. I know that everybody has their own activities that they are holding, and what points that we as a collective need to address or should amplify. If Levi Singh is able to join us today, he had said that he would give a brief update on the very interesting and dynamic youth work that SAT is doing. If he's not able to join us, I have a feeling that we have enough to kind of keep us busy because we'll be finishing early today. And then I wanted to run you through some upcoming key dates, events, and advocacy opportunities that have been highlighted by PVA Global, and also give you an opportunity to let the rest of us know and let me know so I can feed it into the PVA Global calendar, key events, dates, and advocacy opportunities in your own countries. So that's what we had in mind for today. Just as a reminder, I think everybody here is aware of this, but the People's Vaccine Alliance is not an organization. It's a coalition of now over 75 organizations. African groups have been the groups that have joined most actively in the last month. I think we've had over 10 African organizations join in the last month. So not an organization, but a coalition of networks and organizations and individuals dedicated to fighting to end vaccine apartheid. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've been through it quite a bit. These are the 5 demands of the People's Vaccine Alliance, and those of you whose organizations have joined officially have seen these and agreed to them. I will be sharing these slides. These points are also on the website, so you can always access them there. This is something that I just wanted to highlight for those of you who have just joined the People's Vaccine Alliance or are thinking of joining. Once you do join, there is an opportunity to take part in these working groups. So there's a campaign and media group, there's a policy and advocacy group, and an influentials group that tries to reach out to influential people. So that was the group that wrote the letter to Joe Biden, the group that has, contacted Gressa Machel and the Arch of Cape Town and others to write letters about vaccine equity and try to push the narrative. In terms of what has happened in July, I really, first of all, want to thank those of you who have participated in these different campaigns. There was the Eyes on Pharma Greed, so really pointing out the shamelessness of the pharmaceutical companies. I know Jens, MSF, has also done quite a bit of work on this, but there is a campaign, a social media campaign, as well as press releases and reports that have gone out about the fact that there have been 9 pharmaceutical company billionaires, the CEOs of pharma companies. 9 of them have become billionaires since the COVID-19 pandemic started, and really kind of highlighting the greed. I know that SAFAIDS has been tweeting about this and others as well in this group. So thank you for pushing that message. There's also the Olympics campaign. I don't know if you all have seen that, but this was led by Project Citizen, which is one of the partners in the People's Vaccine Alliance. So using the Olympics as an opportunity to highlight vaccine inequity. So not necessarily saying that the Olympics should not be taking place, but really using the media opportunity as a way to highlight vaccine inequity. So again, thank you to people who have recommended. There is a video that is doing the rounds. If you haven't seen it yet, please just check the hashtag on Twitter, Stop Playing Games. There's a video with voices from the Global South talking about the need for leaders to address vaccine inequity, asking, asking people to recognize that if the world can get together to run an Olympic Games during a pandemic, the world should be able to get together to increase vaccine rollout. So our friend Lois from Frontline AIDS was featured in the video, and SAT also recommended 2 young health workers, one from Kenya and one from Durban, who were included in that video. There was a woman from India and some other people from the Global South, I think somebody from Colombia and a person from the Philippines. Oops, sorry, I've just gone to the wrong slide. Another, in terms of other things that have taken place in the last month, there have been press releases, policy briefs, responses to, the manufacturing plant in Senegal. Oh, and here I forgot to put also a response to the Pfizer-BioNTech partnership with BioVac, sort of saying, this is great, but let's remind everybody that it is just fill and finish. And, it's late, better than nothing, but that there's more that can be done. We can talk about that a little bit more in the burning issues. There's a position paper on dose redistribution that just went out a couple of days ago. And this is the People's Vaccine Alliance kind of shifting a little from its demands of just addressing structural issues to also saying there is this surplus of doses in some countries and encouraging some dose redistribution without focusing solely on donations, as some groups have tried to do, really trying to pivot a little bit and say that we recognize that redistribution of doses can help in the short term, but the long-term solution is really the structural change and the manufacturing capability. Just today, there is a brief, the Great Vaccine Robbery, again, focusing on the greed of pharmaceutical companies. There is an associated press release going out today. So you will get this presentation, and all of these links are live. So when you click on them, you will get direct access to the documents. So that is, I don't want to go to the next steps quite yet. What I did want to do is show people some data. So just to let you know, can people see the Excel spreadsheet now? Sorry, I can't see.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we can.
Thank you,
Yep.
Jens. So again, I know that people are collecting their own data, but I wanted to let you know that the People's Vaccine Alliance, via their data section at Oxfam, has been doing a great job of aggregating a whole bunch of different data sources to gather information about vaccine rollout around the continent. We at the African Alliance are still trying, we have committed to producing a monthly report that gives data on vaccine rollout, as well as, just the pandemic generally. But just to give you a sense, and some of you may have already seen this, but, this is to give you a sense of, the percentage of people on the African continent here that are fully vaccinated, only 1.56%. Those who have just received 1 dose, percentage 3.04%. And here our friends at Oxfam in Kenya have basically, what they did is aggregated all the different data sources that are available. So talking about the WHO sources, the Johns Hopkins sources, our World in Data, and tried to come up with a number that they found was most accurate. So here I just want to, and I will send you this as well so you have it, but just to give you a sense of the countries that have passed the 20% threshold, only Mauritius, Morocco, Seychelles are the 3 countries in Africa that have passed that 20% threshold that people have been talking about as a goal before the end of the year. Many countries here that are still below 1% in terms of percentage of people who've received even 1 vaccine. Then here we have the vaccines, the total supply and deliveries to date from the different manufacturers. So this gives you a sense here of which vaccine manufacturers are committed to giving more vaccines to the African continent. And there's also a mini table here about doses secured. So the doses secured are the ones that are committed, and then total delivered. So here, COVAX allocation, here the manufacturer deals, so either bilateral or through the African Union, and then vaccine donation. So those are the 3 sections that we are tracking here. So I just wanted to give you a sense of that. There is a desire to also have more information on the pandemic itself and the number of deaths, and to kind of link those with the figures of vaccine rollout and the struggles that we are experiencing. Are there any questions so far before I go into the strategy and the strategy shift? No. Okay. All right.
Maaza, will you be able to share that Excel sheet,
Yes.
please?
Yes, definitely. I will share it. I will share it. So as I mentioned to you, the People's Vaccine Alliance, given the 3rd wave across the continent and the really slow vaccine rollout, has decided to kind of implement a strategy shift. And for those of you who have been in discussions about this at the various People's Vaccine Alliance working groups, please feel free to chime in. But these are between July and October, the areas that the People's Vaccine Alliance would like to focus on. And this is what I was hoping, those of you, I know SAFAIDs have been working on some of these issues, MSF obviously doing a lot of work on this, and others. So please feel free to chime in. But the idea is to get, perspectives of the Global South in these priorities, letting the People's Vaccine Alliance know if there are things that are being missed. So number 1 is pushing Germany and the rest of the blockers. And I can hear some background noise. If you're not talking, if you could mute yourself, that would be ideal, please, just for the rest of us. Thank you. So the idea is to, as many of you know, Germany is still the key blocker of the TRIPS waiver in Europe. And people feel that if Germany doesn't shift, that the rest of Europe will not shift. So there is really a desire to push Germany. There is an election coming up in Germany soon, I believe in September. And the idea is to do as much as possible through German media, through German influencers, through German, BioNTech is also a German company. So really working on also advocacy to the leading candidates in the upcoming election in order to see if there's a way to already influence them and have the vaccine equity discussion be part of their election campaign. And also working with other European leaders to try and pressure Germany. So that is really one area of strategic focus for the People's Vaccine Alliance. The second is to amplify the voice of the Global South. So people and countries on the cost of inaction. So here we're talking about the 3rd wave, we're talking about the increase in infections and deaths, and also the readiness to manufacture. We have talked a lot about the fact that, Bill Gates, the pharmaceutical companies have insisted that manufacturing in Africa will be too challenging. And there's a lot of discussion about the fact that that is a racist narrative that we have to counter. Now there is a little bit of movement in terms of the fill and finish, but really trying to amplify the voices of the Global South, not only about the stories of the cost of the pandemic, but also the readiness to manufacture. And in terms of the cost of inaction, there is really an effort to develop a group of spokespeople who can either be called on for media opportunities or can also be called on for campaign videos. So, you saw the Olympics one was an example, but others that can be shared. And a few of you on this group, I don't know if Action AID is here, Action AID and AMREF have done great videos from different African countries about sort of amplifying African voices, health workers and others who are dealing with the pandemic. So there really is a push to work on that through the campaigns and media group. And the third priority is continuing this heat on pharmaceutical corporations. So you saw the policy brief that I pointed to today about the pharma greed and really continuing to push that, encouraging. The goal is really to have at least one corporation join CTAP before the end of the year. So the CTAP is separate from the TRIPS waiver, but a way in which pharmaceutical companies can willingly share their technology. And not one has done that yet. This has gone through the WHO, was encouraged by the president of Costa Rica, and to date, not even one pharmaceutical company has joined CTAP. Something else that the People's Vaccine Alliance is really trying to do more of is amplify the work of others. The People's Vaccine does not, run the world, is not an organization, cannot do everything. So really trying to amplify the work of others and identify key opportunities that they may not be aware of. So before we get into kind of future opportunities or in the next month in terms of advocacy opportunities, I just wanted to pause and talk a little bit about the strategy and see if, upon hearing it now, in a very quick way, the strategy shift, if anybody already had any thoughts, concerns, things that are really missing, or things that can enhance the strategy shift of the People's Vaccine Alliance.
I've got a point, or more of a question, perhaps. I mean, I was reading the robbery report that came out today, which is a very good report, I find. And perhaps it's more an expression of frustration that in spite of all of our efforts, very little seemed to change. There's very little movement. On the contrary, everything is bypassed by these bilateral announcements, which are not even, in particular speaking from a South African perspective, which is not even part of the HOP, the WHO RNA HOP sort of agreements. So my question is perhaps more to tactics than, or my point more to tactics than the strategy, whether we are, what are our plans to get more dirty, for lack of a better word, in some of our tactics, because I feel that, and this is no criticism of the report or anything. It's all of us. I feel our arguments and our arguments which are appeals to people's and actors' better sense is falling very much for deaf ears. And at some point, I think we need to go into start shaming people for it to change. Yeah. So I'm interested to see and to learn what the strategic considerations around tactics are.
Okay, thanks, Jens. And I know that there is a desire to do more on shaming, at least pharmaceutical companies. You know, there was a video, I don't know if you saw the video that went around, the satirical video with the guy who was pretending to be a pharma CEO and basically taught, and I can send that, I'll send that out to the group afterwards, but that was an actor, and it was sort of a satirical video, an actor who was portraying a pharma CEO, basically saying some of the things that he, you know, they would say in the back rooms. But, you know, it didn't get that much pickup. I wonder if people were also like, is this real, or is this a joke? You know, because it actually did look quite real, but there was an effort to, there has been discussion about how do we shame them more, whether it is, you know, shaming Germany or shaming pharmaceutical companies. So thank you for that, Jens. And I don't know if anybody has any additional comments about that, but I will definitely take that comment back to the larger People's Vaccine Alliance group. Anybody else have comments on either shaming pharma and tactics, or any other concerns from the People's Vaccine Alliance slight strategy shift for the next few months? No, not at the moment. Okay. What I would ask then is, before we go into opportunities for the next couple of months, you know, something that the People's Vaccine Alliance really makes an effort to do is to highlight upcoming advocacy opportunities, whether they're global meetings or regional meetings, you know, days of action. But before we do that, I wanted to get a sense from you all on projects that you have worked on in the last month that we are maybe not aware of, or, you know, kind of outcomes or actually burning issues. I'm disappointed. I don't think anybody from Health Justice Initiative is here, but I know that they've done quite a bit in the last month in terms of churning out press releases about various issues, and MSF also has, Yen. So if you could, if there's anything that you could brief us on what we might have missed in the last month that MSF has been working on, or anybody else in this group, please. Jens, maybe you could start, since I can see your face here.
I'm not sure, Maaza, because I mean, there is sort of quite a big focus on the WTO conversations, the nitty-gritty of that, which MSF is following quite closely. I was pushing to try and have a condemnation of the EU, the fact that the European Commission at one hand does nothing with pharma. On the contrary, they block the waiver, whereas on the other hand, along principles of not sharing innovation, they punish automakers quite heavily in with financial fines because they fail to share innovation around lessening emissions of cars. But that seems to have, sometimes these things take forever in MSF to get something rolling, in particular when we criticize that side of the world, just from an institutional perspective. So I don't think nothing really, I mean, you will have seen, that's not MSF, but there was the inaugural meeting last week, I think it was, of the PAVM, the Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing, was launched by the Africa CDC and the AU, which is essentially a bringing together of all sorts of interest groups, including some civil society, which we've managed to get involved as well, from across the continent. There's different work streams on innovation, IP, finance, etc. The one challenge we have, and I think we should consider that, picking that up as the Africa group as well, is that there is a preference, it seems, and I think it's a capacity issue, but Africa CDC to lean quite heavily on institutions such as Gavi, CIPI, UNICEF, including to some extent manufacturers, because Africa CDC doesn't have the capacity to drive many of these initiatives. So it either ends with McKinsey or Talberg or who knows, these sort of groups with a lot of input from the usual suspects. And as, again, a compliment to the report from this morning, and we've been saying this from the beginning, but Gavi and CIPI are just as big problems as the pharmaceutical manufacturers in this whole discourse. So I think we need to consider at some point highlighting that in advocacy and public communication towards the Africa CDC.
Okay, excellent. That's really helpful, Jens. And unfortunately, Tian Johnson couldn't join us today. As many of you know, Tian sits in the AVDA, African Vaccine Delivery Alliance, and is a co-chair of the community engagement arm. But we will, on a monthly basis, have updates on Africa CDC and what's happening at the EU. But that is really helpful, Jens. And if there's anything else that you have an update on from your work at the Africa CDC, you should always, feel free to, if you're not able to join the meeting, to drop me a line and I can update people about that. But I know that there is such a focus now, there's obviously a large pool of money that is being distributed by the Africa CDC in the next few months. People are applying for grants. There's that $1.3 billion via the MasterCard Foundation.
Of which most goes into acquisition of vaccines. And the two key proportions of that goes into one, acquisitions and distribution of vaccines. It's relatively small, because 1.3 billion is a lot of money. It's a relatively small amount that goes into some of the stuff that we would like to see, which is coordination, advocacy, research, policy, etc., etc. Donors are essentially, and it includes all of these foundations, they want, at the moment, signal value is in buying vaccines, quote unquote, for Africa. And that's what they are most willing to spend their money on, just like donors.
Okay, thank you. And, for people who are, and I know that many of you have been in these meetings before and are probably very familiar with the acronyms of Gavi and CEPI, et cetera. But if some of them sound new to you, there are notes written in the earlier presentations from these meetings, which we'll make sure to send the links to the former presentations as well, so you have those. But yes, Jens, in terms of Gavi, there's been a lot going around about how Gavi is apparently very pro-COVAX and hasn't really been progressive in how they have been handling the vaccine rollout issues. So, and unfortunately, I didn't realize that Gavi was closely tied with the Africa CDC. I had seen some Twitter posts about McKinsey and Africa CDC being closely tied, which, is sometimes a concern just because of McKinsey's history in other areas and also how much they cost for the work that they do. But thank you for highlighting that. Does anybody else have any comments about this, or even about the shaming aspect of pharma? I mean, I would be curious, as I mentioned, one of the other strategies of the People's Vaccine Alliance, or the strategy shift, is to really highlight voices from Africa. And Jens, since you brought it up, or others in the group, I'm not sure, as you say, appealing to people's humanity hasn't necessarily worked in the past. So, you know, kind of gathering stories from Africa and saying, you know, this is what the people on the ground, either in Africa or Latin America or Asia, are saying, that I doubt is going to shame people. It probably won't shame pharmaceutical companies, but probably the hope is that it will increase attention in countries like Germany, the US, others, who can then lobby their politicians to do more on these questions. So I just wanted to get a sense from you all. You know, some of you have been very graciously giving me names of individuals who you think would serve as good spokespeople. Rosé, they're great people that you have recommended. Jens, there's somebody who you recommended on the list who has also recommended other people. And actually that's a plea to you all that if there are people in your networks, or you yourself actually, if you are ready to put yourself forward, you know, we often get calls for things like a media appearance today, like, you know, Al Jazeera wants somebody tonight to speak about this issue. Do you have somebody on the African continent who's a policymaker or a health worker who can come forward? But now we've also had this request to develop campaign videos and stories about the cost of the pandemic in Africa. So if you yourself or others in your network you think would be either have a good story to tell, or be just, you know, be willing to tell it, or be good sort of policy people for media appearances, please, please, please get in touch with me. But I just want to know what people think about that in terms of those two things being tied, shaming pharma and having these interesting moving stories to tell from Africa. What is the sense from you all on whether that will push the dialogue forward? This really can't be the Jens and Maaza show, people. Charles has unmuted himself. Charles,
Yeah,
please come forth.
I can, well, it's just a reflection on the shaming part. So I was speaking to a friend, I think a few weeks ago, a German friend, and he was sort of like, oh, I'm not for the TRIPS waiver. I would prefer pharmaceutical companies make a profit for the next pandemic. So I don't know if, because I think a lot of people, sort of normal people, sort of feel it's okay to profit from it. And I wondered if we've already made the case, or the case has been made that actually a lot of public money has gone into developing these vaccines, and it's essentially the people's vaccines, your vaccine. So why have you been paying twice for it? Why have you given those profits to the pharmaceutical companies? What exactly did they do above and beyond sort of what the sort of government-funded research has done? So I don't know if that case has been made, or has it been articulated strong enough, but that's just sort of a thing that came to my mind as you were talking.
And I know that, and you know, others who have been following the People's Vaccine Alliance on social media, you know, please let me know, you know, if you think it's been articulated loudly enough. And I know that MSF, you all have done some work about this as well, in terms of the fact that most of these vaccines were developed with public money, and that's part of the reason why they were developed so quickly. You know, in terms of issues of vaccine hesitancy, that is the one question that I hear over and over. How come these vaccines were developed so quickly when we still don't have vaccines for other diseases? And one thing that researchers have continuously said is that this was one of the few times where there were no kind of backstabbing issues for money, because the money was just coming from state actors. So there has been that message of, like, you know, it's not like Pfizer was putting out, you know, billions of dollars to develop these COVID-19 vaccines. So they have had very little of the risk, and now the largest percentage of the profit. So Charles, it sounds like from your perspective, that message has not been articulated clearly enough. I know that there has been an effort to articulate it. I wonder if anybody else has a sense of, you know, whether you've seen that. And Jens, I know that MSF has done this as well, right? The sort of publicly funded.
So I think the challenge is that it becomes a bifurcated conversation about whether one supports patents or whether one wants to undermine patents entirely. And I think the nuance that has been missing, which is probably what the gentleman you referred to, Charles, may actually support as well, is that we're not necessarily talking about undermining innovation by taking away patents. The key argument, including from the South African government around the waiver, is that it cannot be profits that drives an pandemic response, which is the case now. On the public investment, I think it's not the case that the public investment has driven the innovation. What the public investment has done is taken away the financial risk for the pharmaceuticals that is otherwise associated with developing a product. So of course, we could argue that the money are sort of somewhat supporting the innovation. I would provocatively say I think the manufacturers would have developed these products regardless, exactly because the market for it is so big. So what essentially the only thing the public money has done is to take away the financial risks for those that end up having a unviable or an unsuccessful vaccine. So I think the nuance we need to focus more on is, and that's the greed aspect, which is that it's the profits that are driving the global response to a pandemic. And according to most, including EU, Gavi, CEPI, etc., that's okay, which we of course don't think it is.
Okay, great. And we will keep trying to push those messages and to make clear the differences. Thank you. I would like to know if anybody else, and Rosé, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know that you've done some great stuff in the last month or so. Number one, those wonderful materials that you developed, but anything else going on the ground, please, that you can brief the group on that we haven't heard about.
Thanks, Maaza. You caught me just as I was about to send you a message to excuse myself from the meeting. I don't know.
Well,
you're walking around in my brain.
Last word then.
So we haven't been as incredibly involved in the advocacy around vaccine democracy, and as much as yourselves have been. I hope that we will be a little bit more, but again, we have different competencies. So ours, we've leveraged using DigiCards just to get, within our sector, which is more those who operate in the sexual reproductive health response, the HIV response. It's a little bit of a different sector, but there intersects with yours, for example. And we identified, surprisingly, a year and a half into the pandemic in this region, in the SADC region, that even amongst the more educated, seniors in peer CSOs, the basic facts and information wasn't there, and they weren't able to cascade it. And now that we've entered the third wave, the misconceptions, the fears around vaccine uptake started to stand out too. And we also realized that it was, in our little group, it was more amongst, it wasn't so much so amongst the less literate, let's put it that way. I had peers in management and in directorate level who were wary, governance level too, who have been wary. And so we did a little bit, nothing formal, few chats, almost focus group discussions. And we thought, okay, let's get out some info and see how it's reacted to. So we did some simple DigiCards, which we're happy that African Alliance and PVA, were in solidarity to place their logos on. But it also got out to the greater network and listservs that we reach, who aren't really, involved in the COVID vaccine agenda in terms of social justice, in terms of human rights. And so when they see your logos of African Alliance and PVA, they are like, who's that? And they can get involved, and they can get their institutions involved. So that was also the strategy. And we've had a lot of questions, coming in, who are PVA, who are African Alliance. And then, we redirect them to your spaces, particularly your websites. Not all are keen to get onto WhatsApp groups. The overload with WhatsApp groups, right? Yeah. So, and then it's nice because they've got another source that is an African-centered source to access information or have their voice kind of back up the vaccine democracy agenda. So that's a little bit, we're slowly stepping into it. Of course, we've also been doing, like we have programs across the region, and where there's been a little bit of leftover resources and so forth, we're very conscious of our communities, access to basically the disruption on livelihoods, the disruption on basic things like access to sanitary ware, so menstrual hygiene management. And so here and there, when we identify, little pockets of, in quotes, savings because you couldn't do a physical meeting and then a digital one, didn't take up the line item. If there's a couple of $1,000s left there, we engage with funders routinely in the different countries to channel that into material direct support to alleviate risk and maintain dignity, particularly for adolescent girls and young women. And then in the process of doing that, we then, because, they will come together to a space, physically distant, we then put out conversations around myths, misinformation, facts, working through fears and so forth through community dialogue. Yeah, I think that's about it. We're keeping our eye on and trying to meaningfully engage. I'm glad we're a little bit more engaged with African Alliance and PVA and other colleagues on here. And I think we will continue to utilize our spaces, our respective spaces, whether that's social media or listservs or just events, that have nothing to do with COVID, but critical intersects, and advance the products that are coming out, and the campaigns as well. And I think the I one, the greed one.
The Eyes on Pharma greed, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Very important, very important. Some people are a bit resistant. They don't want to get into it because it's politics. I'm like, no, this is not politics. This is human rights. This is this is the right. We have the right to science, or the right to scientific breakthroughs. So yeah, we're going to continue trying and see how we can support. We're not big players in this area.
Thank you. And we're very happy to have you and SAFAIDS. And I think, as everybody here on this call knows, that this pandemic, has highlighted the issues of inequality over all the areas of work where, many of us are focused. So even though you're saying that SAFAIDS doesn't necessarily focus specifically on these kind of vaccine or, TRIPS or IP issues, COVID has touched so many different aspects of life. So I think your inputs are essential.
Yes. We definitely, because there are groups that have been impacted, that were already criminalized, that were left in the margins of social justice pre-COVID, and it has just tenfold, 20-fold affected them. That we do, yes, that we really speak up for, and we've become very bold, even in the proposals, even engaging funders. This is where you need to put the money, and it's yeah, so that we do. And it's really mainly LGBTQ+I, sex workers, AGYW, that's adolescent girls and young women, and those living with disability, but also PLHIV, because a lot of the health, because our primary work is looking at health and their intersex. So a lot of the health services in our fragile countries, as you're aware, have rerouted to COVID response, and all these other essential services have cracked. And so there's huge cracks that we continue to advocate for daily. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Thank you. And I know, Rosé, that you said you do need to jump off. We'll be sorry, we'll miss you, but feel free to jump off at any time. But I just wanted to say that, in terms of the storytelling, I wonder if there's an opportunity to highlight those kind of issues as well, to kind of point out to people and remind people that, this pandemic is not only people who see it. And now I wonder, for those of you who are also in touch with people in the global north, if you are seeing a shift in that narrative of COVID now, the third wave will no longer affect us because we are vaccinated. I'm seeing this narrative of recognizing that we are all in this together with the Delta variant causing, what people are calling breakthrough infections, or, there's even this discussion of now the booster shots, because the 2 doses of Pfizer are maybe not as effective against Delta, or maybe the efficacy is sort of waning. And that's something that the People's Vaccine Alliance is really trying to address, the ridiculousness of having booster or 3rd shots for people in the global north, when in Africa and Asia and Latin America, people still haven't received their first vaccine. So there is some discussion about that. But I wonder, in terms of the storytelling, do you feel that highlighting that this is not just about COVID, but all the other investments that either donors or governments have made are being put at risk by this pandemic? Again, I'm in 2 minds about trying to appeal to people's humanity with storytelling, but there is a desire and there is kind of an interest in putting funds aside to develop campaign materials that talk about the impact of the pandemic in the global south. So, Rosé, if you're still here, yes, you are still here. If you think that those kind of stories could be told with the people that you work on, yes, human interest is so vital, Rosé says. So does anybody else have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm always in 2 minds, because we don't only want to have stories of Black and brown people suffering in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, but it really is trying to kind of influence the decision makers and also influence people who vote for decision makers. So if anybody has thoughts on that, please let me know, because it seems that quite a bit of effort will go into the storytelling campaigns in the next couple of months from the People's Vaccine Alliance. I'm going to start putting people on the spot. Frontline AIDS. Susan, you're still here. Frontline AIDS, what do you think? You all have been very active on social media, and I know that Lois obviously was in that Olympics campaign. Any thoughts about that? Susan's still on mute.
Yeah, you definitely put me on the spot. I mean, we haven't been doing very much. Next week we have got a training session with our regional group and the South African Women Voice and Leadership Group, where the last time, Maaza, you joined that meeting. This week coming back for training. So what I'll be doing next week is giving an update, and your presentation today was really helpful, because I can give an update on the campaign, and I can encourage people to be involved. I'm not sure, if any of our partners have joined the campaign or not, but I'll definitely give it another push next week, and we can have a discussion. What I'll do is I'll leave some time to find out how people have been involved or want to be involved. And I'll also bring the attention to all of the different the shift in priorities and the tools and the resources that have been made available, because I think the more information people have, the better they are able to engage. And I would be interested to hear if any of them have actually been engaging within their countries. But yeah, I don't have any update at this point.
Okay.
Maybe at the meeting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So what I'll do now, and please, anybody, feel free to raise your hand and jump in at any time. But what I would like to do then is show you the slide of kind of upcoming opportunities that the People's Vaccine Alliance has identified. And we will send this presentation out to everybody, so you'll have access to it. But in terms of, so here are the strategic priorities we have discussed and key dates coming up in the near future. So the World Trade Organization General Council meetings are in July and October. So the World Trade Organization will be discussing the TRIPS waiver. So actually we're already the 29th. So that was the last couple of days. So another General Council meeting coming up on the 13th and 14th of October. The Olympics campaign is going on as we speak. So it started with kind of a big blast of the video and the hashtag Stop Playing Games. And what they are doing is throughout the Olympics highlighting specific events. So for example, yesterday, Germany was playing Côte d'Ivoire in a football match, and they kind of had graphics graph showing, the percentage of vaccinations in Côte d'Ivoire versus Germany. So really just trying to keep the attention on this idea of vaccine inequity throughout the Olympics. So thank you to those of you who have been retweeting. Please, if you are on Twitter or your organizations are on Twitter, please check the People's Vaccine Twitter account, and when you can, do retweet, because they are trying to get as much traction as possible on the Stop Playing Games campaign. There was a protest in Berlin with the hashtag Make Them Sign, so trying to get the German government sorry, that was there was an event last week, and in September coming up, there's a Make Them Sign protest to try and get Germany to sign the TRIPS waiver or to approve the TRIPS waiver. Then there's the G20 health ministers meeting coming up in Rome as well. So people see that as an opportunity to do some advocacy or some influencing. The UN General Assembly coming up in September. Again, anytime there are meetings with kind of high level people who can maybe speak out about vaccines or COVID-19 or inequity. As we mentioned, the German federal elections are coming up in September. So there's a lot of work going into trying to already advocate to the candidates that look like they might be in the lead and to try and encourage them to already have COVID-19 vaccine inequity on their radar. World Bank annual meetings coming up in October. The G20 itself coming up in Rome in October. So the health ministers meeting is first, and then the larger G20, and then the big climate change conference taking place in Scotland in October and November. So the reason why the People's Vaccine Alliance lists these and kind of tries to plan in advance is that they often see these as opportunities for advocacy, whether to develop a campaign or whether to target key influentials or to use that as an opportunity to release a press release or have some other statement that goes with one of these events. So I have two questions. Is one, if any of your organizations are planning any events linked to any of these, please let us know, let me know. You can either let us know now as a group or send me an email. And number two, my question would be, are there any other dates or events that we have forgotten that are not listed here? Charles, you and I were in a joint meeting the other day. Charles joined the campaigns and media group at the People's Vaccine Alliance. And thank you, Charles, for doing that. You have no idea how excited the People's Vaccine Alliance folks were to have you join that. And something that we talked about was that November will mark 1 year since the Johnson & Johnson ensemble trial kicked off in South Africa. And, even though November seems like it's a long time away, it's really not. And if Johnson & Johnson is still not being actively rolled out by then, that might be an opportunity to have some kind of campaign around that. December obviously will mark the 1 year anniversary since the first COVID-19 vaccine was administered in the UK. So I think it was the first ever, and maybe people can remind me, I believe the first ever was administered in the UK to an elderly woman. I remember seeing a video about that. So that might be an opportunity for some kind of, story or campaign around, it's been a year and still we're only at this percentage of vaccinations in Africa or elsewhere. So yes, so just kicking this back to you all, are any of your organizations planning activities linked to any of these, or are there dates that we have missed that you think would be useful for advocacy opportunities coming up in the next few months? Are there any dates in your countries that you think would be interesting? I fear that we might have missed an opportunity for Women's Day in South Africa. And Susan, I don't know if any of the people you're working with are doing this. And that was a miss on my part. Somebody actually brought it up at the last, at our last monthly meeting.
I was just thinking exactly the same thing, but I'm thinking that I'll speak to my colleagues and maybe we can have something that comes out of our training next week, which is actually happening every day. I don't think the 9th is next week, it's the Monday after. So yeah, maybe we can organize something, or at least, you know, put out commentaries or something like that, and try and pull out a feminist and a women's rights perspective on that. So, I mean, it'll only really be relevant for our South African partners because it's a national day, but I think it's definitely worth making a noise on that day about this specifically.
Great. And I see
I'll get back to
Nsiki.
you if we come up with something.
Thank you. And if you do, you know, and you want the People's Vaccine Alliance or the African Alliance, or, you know, to amplify it, please, you know, do let us know. And if you have something at the last minute, you know, the People's Vaccine Alliance does not have much funding at the moment, but for campaigns, you know, that come up like this, if there's just something that you think, gosh, if we only had, you know, $500, we could develop, you know, some pamphlets or some, you know, I guess pamphlets is, you know, in this COVID-19 age, we're not distributing pamphlets, but some kind of graphics or something like that, you know, feel free to let me know. And Nsiki, I see your note here. Are you also talking about Women's Day as an opportunity?
Yes, thanks, Maaza. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that we were struggling to think what we would do for Women's Day. But I think that this is, I mean, we've got research that was published recently around how the impact of COVID-19 has, you know, really impacted women. And so we could definitely use that as a hook into the, you know, sort of vaccine inequity messaging. And we'll release that online, and we'll develop a toolkit that we can share with people so that you could support online.
That would be fantastic. And Nsiki, just for people who don't know you, can you just introduce yourself, which organization you're with?
Sure, my name is Nsiki. I work in the communications department at Section 27. It's a public interest law center based in Johannesburg. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nsiki. So yeah, keep me posted. And as you're talking, I'm actually realizing that another date that seems like it's very far away, but is unfortunately not, is World AIDS Day. And I wonder, especially now with data coming out about people living with HIV, I believe being at, you know, higher risk from the Delta variant. Initially, I hadn't seen any data about that last year in terms of COVID-19 and higher risk for people living with HIV. But correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I've seen some headlines in the last few weeks about people living with HIV being at higher risk of severe disease from the Delta variant. Is that correct?
Geez, Maaza, I actually haven't seen any of that kind of data come through. I will definitely check with the PLHIV sector if there's anything that we can pick up on. I certainly haven't seen anything in our media, but it may have come out of the UNAIDS report that was released recently, which I haven't engaged in deeply. I just attended this session, and there was quite a lot of, you know, sort of good news coming out of there, but not in relation to COVID-19. I don't think they made any announcements around that. I'll look into it.
Okay, that's great. And does anybody else have any information about that? I just saw the headlines and I hadn't dug into the articles. Does anybody have any knowledge of this added risk for people living with HIV? If not, we can just put it on our radar as something to follow up on. But I do think that, you know, World AIDS Day might be an opportunity. One, if that is a story, you know, of people living with HIV being at higher risk. But regardless, I think, you know, as Rosé mentioned, with other health services being damaged or, you know, hindered because of COVID-19, even the story of people not being able to access their HIV treatments as easily as they otherwise would. You know, obviously many of our countries in the region have large HIV treatment programs, but South Africa having, you know, one of the largest, maybe, I don't know if people at Section 27 or others, you know, we'll be sharing this report, and people who work more directly in the HIV treatment field can let us know. But do people think that World AIDS Day would be a good opportunity to do some advocacy as well?
I think so, very much. I mean, what you note there about access to ordinary treatment is very much manifest in South Africa. We have a report that was developed by the Treatment Action Campaign into sort of the impact that having the lockdowns and all of that kind of thing has on access to ARVs and ART. And so I think it's a natural link. I think it would be a useful advocacy time.
Okay, great. So I will put that, I will recommend, and actually for those of you who are joining the larger call, which is starting in about 25 minutes, maybe we can talk about that there as well, in terms of, future dates that they probably do not have on their radar. Obviously, the Women's Day in South Africa is very focused on South Africa. And I think maybe as a global campaign, we missed the opportunity for the Global Women's Day in March. But we can certainly, World AIDS Day is a global event. So we can use that as an opportunity and maybe actually use that as a storytelling, develop some stories with people living with HIV as part of the storytelling narrative. So I will keep you posted on that. And I would just ask, as I said earlier, if you yourselves or people in your organizations or networks feel comfortable or would like to come forward to be part of the storytelling campaign, please let me know. We are looking for a variety of people. One is people who are kind of strong on policy or could be strong on policy with a little bit of support and would be willing to come forward, if there was a media opportunity. So as I said, we sometimes get requests. Unfortunately, they're usually for today, like at 8 p.m. Sky News wants somebody from an African country who can speak to issues of COVID inequity, so people who are willing to do that, but then also people who just have good stories to tell, who have been affected by COVID-19. And when I say good stories, that's actually, I'm phrasing that wrong, have stories to tell that could be impactful about their experiences in their communities with COVID-19, in their families, that would be willing to speak about it. So as I said, Rosé has recommended some people. SAT also recommended some people who have been working in their communities, either health workers, community health workers, others who have lost family members to COVID and are willing to share that story. So if there are people like that in your network or you yourself would be interested and willing, please reach out to me. I'm seeing Charles is sharing links. Thank you, Charles. Feel free to chime in. Can you tell us what are these links here?
It was just the last one. I think it's Larry Madow, who's a CNN reporter. He gave a personal account of how his uncle and his grandmother was suffering from COVID while he was very easily able to get his COVID vaccine in a pharmacy in the US. So I think stories like that are quite moving, and they show the difference quite starkly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll save, Viv, of course, you'll save the chat as well, and we'll share that around with the report so people have these links. And thank you. I see here Rachel has shared a WHO report, people with HIV at risk. Great. Thank you for sharing these links, and feel free to save them now, people, or we will also save the chat and send it out with the report. Does anybody else who has not spoken have anything to add? We're actually ahead of schedule and we're a smaller group than I expected. So we could actually leave. And can I just ask who on this group is planning to join the larger People's Vaccine Alliance call at the top of the hour? Anybody?
I'll join that one.
Excellent, Charles. I might put you on the spot then during that call, if you don't mind. And anybody else? I know that Section 27, sometimes your representatives are there. Will you be joining the bigger call? No.
Not me, Maaza, sorry. We have another internal meeting at that same time.
Okay, no worries. And, and the nice thing about the People's Vaccine Alliance is that none of the meetings are actually, quote, required. Yeah, they happen. The larger People's Vaccine Alliance call happens every 2 weeks. And then the various working groups have regular meetings. So as I said, for those of you who are thinking about joining the People's Vaccine Alliance, or if you've already joined and you haven't joined one of the groups, it would be great if you would consider it. So there's the Campaigns and Media group, there's the Influentials group, and there's a Policy and Advocacy group. And all of those are, when you are available, or if there is a campaign ongoing that requires some work. For example, I know the Campaigns and Media group was quite busy in the build up to the Olympics campaign. So there was a flurry of activity there, and then it sort of dips a little bit. So it's really, it's an alliance, and it's a group of people who are just coming together for the goal, but none of it is sort of, everybody knows that you're doing this in addition to your regular tasks. So we appreciate it. Okay, I think that was the end of my slides, and we will be sharing this. Does anybody have any final thoughts, questions, concerns, issues to bring up before we wrap up? I don't think so. Okay, well, I think we can wrap up then. I really, I mean, we so much appreciate people joining these meetings. I know that we are kind of tired of being Zoomed every day, but this kind of session, the informal gathering once a month, is really important. We will be sharing the report, and the presentation will come first, just so you have it, and the chat from the Zoom, and then we'll quickly write a very short report with a link to the transcript. And that's what I have found is easier for people to digest. If you think that that's not easy to digest, please let me know. But what the feedback that we've gotten is that people don't really like long reports, that they'd prefer a very short report. And then what we have been doing is just tagging, if you want more detail, you know, at minute 52 in the transcript, you can see more detail about that discussion. Can I already get, does anybody have any feedback about the reports, or, you know, if you've had a chance to look at them, is that a way that works for you for the reporting from these informal meetings?
I can speak, Maaza. I mean, I find them very useful. I think it's, you know, especially when you want to share information with others, and I think, you know, not having everything bulked into one document makes it easier, and you can just kind of go and find information about, you know, additional stuff that you're looking for. So I found them very useful.
Okay, thank you, Susan. And for those of you who would like to join our Africa WhatsApp group and are not on it, feel free to send me your number and we will add you to the WhatsApp group. It's not a super noisy WhatsApp group. There are not a lot of comments coming every day, so don't worry. So please let me know if you would like to join that. And I think if nobody has any other questions, we can wrap up for the day. And thank you so much to everybody, and I hope you have a good end of the month.
Thanks, Maaza.
Maaza.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Maaza.
Thank you for
Bye.
convening us.
Thank you. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.